Okay, sorry.
Yep. No, you're good.
Okay, so my name is Chayla, and today I'll be discussing the impact of wind farm development on elephants, specifically in South Africa. Elephants are an important piece of the culture, biodiversity, and economy in South Africa, and so their protection is really important to the local area. And so basically, I just want to assess the impacts of how the development of renewable energy sources, specifically wind farms, will affect them. Okay, just to begin with starting with South Africa's energy crisis. So they are one of the most energy intensive economies in the world. They are one of the largest emitters of greenhouse gases, being that 70% of their energy consumption comes from coal and fossil fuels. I'm trying to see if you can see Dr. Slattery. But yes, so because they are using this as their main source and because a lot of their infrastructure is not updated, they experience something called load shedding, and basically that is like unplanned and disproportionate outages in their energy capacity. So that affects the businesses, households, and individuals there, which also in turn affects their economy and the biodiversity as well because of the emissions. And so they are looking to switch to a more renewable energy source. They are planning to reach net zero by 2050. And so they are looking to completely have a renewable energy mix by that time. And they're specifically looking into water, wind, and solar with emphasis on wind and solar. And that will basically reduce their human impact on climate change by reducing their greenhouse gas emissions, and then also some more sustainable option, and in turn, bring back those job opportunities that are being lost right now because of their main source of energy. And so there is a proposed wind farm, which is the Bayview Wind Farm, which is the wind energy facility. It is proposed to be located near Addo Elephant Park, which is near the Eastern Cape. And that wind farm will be 5 kilometers from the western side of the Elephant Park. And it's expected to be there for at least 20 to 25 years with a maximum of 45 wind turbines. They chose this location because the Eastern Cape is optimal because it does have the desired wind speeds for wind turbines, as well as the high elevations will make it a better location for having those wind farms. It's just a little bit about Addo. So Addo Elephant National Park is the third largest national park in South Africa. They focus on wildlife conservation, and basically they are working to combat extinction and overpopulation. So they're working with the local private reserves and the national parks to control those populations, work on breeding, and just ensure that none of those endangered species are becoming extinct as well. And so they have about 600 elephants there and many other mammal and bird species. And because it is one of their larger parks and it is well known, there is high amounts of tourism, and people from all over the world come there just to see those elephants. It is a magical sight just from being there in person. And yeah, so they have a high amount of tourism, and that is where they get a lot of their economy from. And so it is a major source of economy for the local area. So a lot of the setbacks with this proposed wind farm is that there's a lack of research for how wind farms specifically will affect mammals. There's a lot of research for how it affects birds and migratory birds and bats specifically, but not so much on elephants or any other creature like that. And so that is a concern for many activists because they're not sure of how that will impact them being that close to Addo. And so also their environmental impact assessment showed no feedback from the local national parks. So there was no input from those experts in those local areas of how they think that those creatures will be affected because they're with them every day and they're working on their conservation. And so that is something that was missing from their impact assessment. And then also a lot of the private reserves in that area are objecting or not for the development of that wind farm near that area. Just because, like I said, a lot of the private reserves, they're there for their economy and they rely heavily on tourism. And if those wind farms are there, it will not be a pretty sight. And so they are not for that as well. And then also, like I mentioned before, there's not a lot of research, so people are scared that it may cause more damage than what they are anticipating. And so the negative impacts of the wind farms that are suspected are that it will destroy the natural environment, and so there will be habitat loss. A lot of those species will not have access to food or shelter like they did before, and then that will in turn cause displacement. So they will be, and the displacement will cause fragmentation as well. And then overall, there's already kind of land damage there due to like the grazing and the different animals there in the area, and then also the development of that farm will cause further damage to the land. As I mentioned before, the tourism is a major source of economy there, and so they get high tourism, and they are scared that the development of that wind farm and just those tall wind turbines will affect the view shed, and tourists will not be as likely to come there anymore, so that would cause a decline in tourism, and then also light pollution will affect the different species as well. And so I just stumbled across this article that says Wind Project near South African Elephant Farm. Wildlife activist and someone that we know, which is Dr. Folds, he was talking about in this article how they recognize that the development of wind energy or renewable energy is important for South Africa due to their current status, and that they are for that, but they are not going to risk the conservation or biodiversity of the area, and they will not put all of their years of conservation to waste due to that. Oh, and basically he just says that the farm risks degrading the wild experience of going on a safari, which basically goes with the tourism aspect of it as well. And so specifically the impacts on wildlife, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of research on how it affects birds and bat species, but not so much the elephants or different mammals. And so for bats specifically, it changes the air pressure, and so when they're flying, it causes barotrauma, which basically, it affects their brain chemistry and collapses their lungs, which causes a lot of damage to their body function, and then also could potentially risk them dying. And so that in turn causes an increased mortality and injuries for bats. And then also it just changes the migratory behavior of those different bird species because of the signals that are being transmitted from those wind farms or wind turbines. And so because of the research that they have on bats, which are mammals, they suspect that it will also affect the other mammals like the elephants. And because elephants communicate in low frequency transmissions and also wind turbines emit those transmissions as well, they are scared that it will affect their communication, which will and then change their behavior, causing them to be less tolerant and more aggressive. And so because wind or renewable energy is important for South Africa, I do believe that they should implement that, and it is important to their sustainability and a great option for their mitigation for climate change and reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. However, they need to do that in a way that supports biodiversity. And so to minimize that trade-off, they should do more detailed monitoring and testing and just overall research of how those, or the development of renewable energy will affect those different species other than birds and bats. And then also just evaluating the cost of mitigation and if it's even worth risking those species and their behavior and changing all of those things. And so, like I mentioned before, the elephants at Addo are very important to the area. They're important for the culture, the economy, and just the overall biodiversity of the area. And so to basically put them at risk would in turn affect the entire biodiversity of the area. And so they just need to do more research and then, so you do more research and then like the baby wind of the area is likely to cause severe impacts to those creatures, and because there's lack of information, that is all they have to go off of right now, but they're really scared that it will affect the elephants and their communication behavior. And so basically, animals just need to be considered in the developmental process of the renewable energy development, and that's all.
Okay, cool. Time, please.
8 minutes, 40 seconds.
Okay.